Welcome to our podcast, Inspiring Living, with me, Mark Candelaria. I am an architect, blogger, traveler, chef, father, and husband. I am the founder and now partner of a fabulous 20-person architecture firm specializing in high-end residential architecture, designing amazing homes across the country. We have hosted tours over the last 20 years to Italy, Spain, and soon Napa. And in the course of all this, I have met a lot of interesting people who truly inspire me. We are excited to now be in our second season, and our podcast is about all the opportunities that are right there in front of us to inspire living. Yes, we will talk about architecture and design, but every week we will venture to all sorts of topics that will inspire you, teach you, and motivate you to inspire living every day. My guests will include a wide gamut of amazing people, from those in the design industry to clients to real estate professionals, chefs, artists, sports figures, and philanthropists, and people who just flat out get it. So sit back and enjoy, and let's have some fun exploring all the opportunities that are there just waiting for us. Please subscribe and get ready to be inspired every week. Okay, as my dad says, here we go. Because Inspiring Living is all about the people and the organizations that inspire us, we are excited to have Monogram Appliances as one of our sponsors. Anytime we do a new kitchen or a kitchen remodel, Monogram Appliances are what we recommend to our client. Their appliances are the definition of luxury, meticulously detailed using the finest materials and an ownership experience that is second to none. This is how Monogram is always thinking ahead and inspiring and elevating the kitchen experience. Because at Monogram, they don't just elevate one thing, they elevate everything. Welcome everyone, and thanks again for listening to our podcast, Inspiring Living. Welcome to Season 2, and today I have a wonderful podcast featuring none other than another architect. Yes, you heard that correctly. Today's podcast features renowned architect, good friend, and virtually my next door neighbor, architect Brent Kendle. Brent's work is simply amazing. He is known for his contemporary eco-friendly work, and we are both founding members of the Arizona Residential Architects, started by another good friend and architect who we need to get on this podcast, by the way, Nick Tsontakis. Give this podcast a listen, as you will hear a wonderful story about how Brent followed his passions and has built a very successful architectural firm doing work around the world. Okay, a few announcements. Stay tuned for the upcoming Iconic House 2, which my Candelaria design partner Vivian Ayala and I were proud to design. This home will feature the work of a number of top interior designers from across the country, including the entry space decorated by my wife Isabel's Earth and Images team. The virtual tours will begin on November 27th, so stay tuned for that. We also are proud to announce a spectacular 14-page spread in the new holiday edition of Phoenix Home and Garden magazine, featuring one of my favorite Candelaria design homes that my partner Vivian Ayala and I designed in the middle of an 80-acre lettuce field in Yuma, Arizona. This is a 14,000 square foot house where we designed everything down to the mouse houses in the baseboards. And trust me, these are not just any mouse houses. These are tricked out by miniature artists June Clinksdale and Chris Toledo. They are over the top, so check this out. So from ultra-traditional in Yuma to super modern contemporary in Paradise Valley, you need to check out our cover feature in the November-December Lux magazine, featuring a stunning Candelaria design home built by Schultz Development with masterfully designed and decorated interiors by designer Anita Lang. Check out her Season 1 episode 40 podcast. Yeah, we did a great interview with Anita, so check that out. Okay, I want to give a big thank you to all of you who have been listening to our podcast, as our listeners keep growing nicely. Thank you also for the ratings and reviews. We had some nice reviews for our Pat McLaughlin podcast last time, which I also encourage you to listen to. It was a great podcast, and we are giving a free pasta maker away to that review, so you definitely want to give those reviews. I really appreciate them. And here's the deal. The first review we get dated November 15th or later will receive a free Candelaria Collection pasta maker. So give us some love on those ratings and reviews. We do our best to inspire living in everything we do, from our podcast to our cooking classes to our tours, and of course with our Candelaria Design homes. Okay, have a great week, everyone, and let's all live our lives with love, compassion, grace, and positivity. Okay, here we go. Our guest today is a fellow acclaimed Arizona architect, Brent Kendle. I met Brent many years ago while we were both attending architecture school at ASU. Today we are good friends, Neighbors and fellow members of a wonderful group, we are both proud to be members of the Arizona Residential Architects, otherwise known as ARA. In 2002, Brent founded his own firm, Kendle Design Collaborative, that today has achieved numerous design awards, appeared on magazine covers and luxury brand automobile campaigns, as well in international design exhibits, books on modern and eco-design, and design publications from more than 30 countries. Well, welcome, my friend and neighbor. I thought you might just walk over here, but I guess you decided just to drive over, huh?
Well, thanks for having me, Mark. Yeah, I should have walked over. It's such a beautiful day. I feel bad now.
Well, no, it's okay. A lot of times we walk your direction, and you've been so kind to have a nice group out there, sometimes sitting out in the front curb, and you guys have some good wine, and did you try to crash that party?
Yeah, well, no, you should crash it. Right when the COVID thing hit, we were having kind of our socially distant happy hours, and it was got to meet all of our neighbors, so it was actually really enjoyable.
Well, you're my first architect guest.
Great.
And so I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, what the heck is Candelaria doing with another architect on his podcast? But I admire you. I mean, like George used to say, Benny Gonzalez is my favorite architect. Or he used to ask his mum, he used to ask Mumsy, who's your favorite architect? I like Benny Gonzalez. So anyway, we'll get into some George stories down the road here, but you truly are one of my favorite architects. I mean, I think your work is just fantastic. I love following you on social media, and obviously we're friends from the ARA, but I admire your work. I admire your dedication to your craft, and you're just a cool guy.
Oh, well, gosh.
Unfortunately, I don't get enough time to spend with everybody I end up meeting, but you are definitely one I would love to spend more time with, because just the few times that we always have great conversations, and we go down some pretty good rabbit holes, and I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mark. I do too.
So let me ask you this: where are you from, and when and did you get an interest in being an architect?
Well, I grew up in the Chicago area, probably like a lot of people out here in the Valley, and I was always artistic as a kid growing up, and I was both kind of musical and artistic. So I played the drums and I drew a lot, but when I was about 10 or so years old, my mother actually opened a Frank Lloyd Wright book that
cool.
she had when she was in college. And I grew up in a house that my mother and father designed and built, so it was a unique house. Of course, I just took it for granted. And but from that day that I had that book opened and looked at Frank Lloyd Wright's work, that was literally the day I point to and say that's the day I wanted to become an architect. So my path was kind of set from that point.
That's cool. So in junior high school, did you take drafting and things like that?
I did. We were really fortunate. Back in the day when programs like music and different things were supported, were offered and supported, and we actually in my high school we had a drafting class with probably 30 desks and all the latest drafting equipment, and before computers and all of that.
All hand drafting.
Yeah, so took drafting classes, took descriptive geometry, which was an interesting thing, trying to figure out how to draw things. So I think that was really helpful. So when I did come out and started in the pre-architecture program at ASU, I felt like I had a real advantage over a lot of people who did not have that background.
Yeah,
so
mine was the same situation. In high school, we had a really great drafting program. In fact, my drafting teacher just passed away about a week or so ago. So God bless you, Hank Schmier. You taught me well, and I learned so much, just like you said, getting those basic skills in that class that just totally helped me for many, many years after that.
Ironically, there was a program in the Chicago area that was hosted by the Illinois Institute of Technology, where Mies van der Rohe was head of the architecture department. I mean, I'm sure he had long deceased since when I was at that age, but we actually had an annual competition designing residential projects, which now I look back and that was kind of interesting. And so it was it was kind of a statewide deal, and so maybe got some of my early training in residential that way.
So how did you pick ASU? A kid from Chicago. What made you want to come out the Arizona way?
I think a number of things. I was always very fascinated with passive solar design. Growing up in the Chicago area, when I would look at the architecture that would interest me was architecture that seemed like it was designed for a purpose. It looked like it reflected what it was actually doing. So ASU had a passive solar architecture program. I think it was actually a master's degree program, which I didn't take, but they were very, they promoted kind of a very pragmatic approach to design where with passive solar strategies.
Yeah. So what year was that when you came out here?
It was actually 1978.
78. Okay, so I came here in 79.
Okay.
And I know you know one of my good buds from Durango, Colorado, Danny Brown.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So Danny and I were at the same time, 78, 79, and we were in pre-architecture.
Okay.
And we had lectures with Cal Straub and George Christensen and sketching and rendering with Bruce Kimball and all those great names, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's in some ways, that's kind of like I don't know, I'd call it the Brat Pack or something from back then, because I mean, those three were so influential and
totally right.
And they were so unique. There was a certain element of I guess just celebration in life that those guys had. They were very, very good architects, but there was I think Cal Straub probably got more people to choose architecture as a profession than anybody else, because they would go to his history of architecture,
which was
classes.
just a general elective for a lot of people.
Right,
they weren't architecture majors, but they would take that class as an elective,
right,
and be exposed to Cal Straub.
And all it was essentially Cal showing slides of his travels around the world, which always involved a big orange blanket and a picnic in some just amazing exotic place, and it was really all about living life.
Yeah,
and people would go, I want to live like that.
Right.
And so a lot of people did turn to architecture for that.
That's interesting. So I remember quite a few of the crew from back then. I mean, there was like Perry Becker. I mean, I don't know how many of these guys you still communicate.
So Perry was a year after me.
Was
I remember
after,
Perry.
So he was in my crew then.
Okay.
So you were a year ahead of me then.
Right.
Yeah. So there was Perry. Well, let's see. How old are you right now?
I will be 60 in a couple weeks.
Yeah. So we're the same age. I think I went to see you my freshman year in 78. You came here your freshman year.
I did.
Okay, so we're the same. We're the same class. I transferred here in 79. And so, that was Perry Becker. There's a whole bunch of guys that I used to hang out with. And I still talk to some of them. I haven't talked to Danny Brown in a while. But Danny Brown and I used to work on the narrow gauge train in Durango together.
Oh, wow.
And then his dad and my dad actually went to high school together.
That's crazy.
So way back.
Huh.
And then he started working at George's office and got an interest in law and went back and got his law degree.
Oh, that's great.
And said, screw architecture.
Yeah.
And I think he's the city of Phoenix attorney now.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
interesting.
great.
Interesting way that all turned out. But so you went to ASU.
I did.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, like I said, I came out in 78. I mean, when I left Chicago, I mean, I was kind of a long-haired rock and roll kind of kid, and I remember my dad saying, "Oh, you better get used to that country music out there," because I had no concept of what Arizona was all about, and I just remember getting off the airplane in Arizona, and then I went the fraternity route, so all that kind of social engagement and everything, and we had just become a Pac-10 school. So I mean, our very first football game I think was playing USC, and
the Frank Cush days. We got the tail end of the Frank Cush days. Right. He had a little run-in with the punter or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I think hit him upside the head or something. But it was very different than it is today.
Yeah,
I think.
Oh yeah, when I drove through Tempe the other day, and I just couldn't believe how I don't recognize it. I mean, I see this architecture school. I can kind of find it in the midst of all the high rises now, but what a difference! And I have not walked the campus in probably, I bet you it's been 30 years since I've walked the campus.
You should really go back and do it. I don't do it often enough. The few times I go back there, at least for me, there's a certain energy just walking down the mall. Yeah. And I mean, today there probably wouldn't, because there's probably nobody there, but unfortunately, but there's a certain energy, and I honest to God think it is, you're surrounded by young people that have their whole lives in front of them. And they can do anything with their lives at that point.
And they're all there simultaneously.
They're all there, and they're all there to learn and have fun. And there's just there's an energy about that you get out in the working world, it's different.
Yeah, absolutely different. So you went through the whole architecture program. How long were you there? 5 years?
So it was a 5-year program. They don't have the same program anymore. They have only, I think, a master's degree and then an undergraduate degree in science, whatever. When I went there, it was a 5-year program. You had 2 years in pre-professional, and then you had to apply for to get in. In architecture school, it was like 45 seats, and you had about 500 people applying for 45 seats. It was kind of interesting because I just assumed everybody I knew in pre-architecture wanted one of those 45 seats. So there was kind of this thought process that the people that got into landscape architecture or industrial design or interior design, that was like, oh, that's too bad. They didn't make it into architecture. And it took me a while of kind of, maturing through that process of realizing, no, those people were actually passionate about
that,
that profession that they chose. They didn't want to be an architect.
Right, right. Yeah, so the ASU years, they went by pretty fast. I remember, obviously, I dropped out a little early and started working for George. And that all led to a lot of great things for me. Where did you go after you finished ASU?
Well, so when I graduated in 1983, which was, I think they say it's the last time that the economy was as bad as it was in 2008. So there wasn't a lot of jobs open. I come from the Chicago area, and at the time, Arizona really wasn't known as an architectural mecca. It was, in some ways, I hate to say it, but it was kind of thought of as a little bit of a playground. People vacationed here. People went to ASU and had fun for 4 or 5 years, or 6 or 7 for some, I'm sure. And then if you're from a big place, a Chicago, a Los Angeles, New York, then you went someplace where big things happen.
Right.
And I did the same thing, again, probably a little naively. So I went back to Chicago, looked for work. There was literally no work to be had. Fortunately, I had designed a passive solar home when I was in college and done the working drawings and all of that, and it was under construction. So I graduated in May. They had broken ground probably in April or something. It was about a mile from my house where I grew up. So that was a great experience there. So while I wasn't able to get a job right off the bat, I finally just put a sign out in front of that, and I actually got another project and designed another passive solar house out in Wayne, Illinois.
I always tell people those $300 job signs are the best investment we ever get.
Yeah, I'm sure mine was way less than that. I think I bought a piece of plywood and hand painted it.
There you go.
I'm sure. But I eventually did get a job offer for a large firm. I think it was called Barantic Conti, and they did a lot of condos along Lakeshore Drive, and I was excited to get that job. And then meeting with the partners, I said, well, this is great, because they said, well, you're going to be drafting and building models and things, the typical thing you do in Chicago. It's kind of a pay your dues to play the blues kind of town. And I said, well, that's great, because I've got a house, I'm designing out in the suburbs, and I can do my design work then. And they're like, well, no, you can't. Like, there's this no moonlighting thing. So at that point, I decided to kind of turn that down. And then about a month later, got a job offer, over the phone from a small company here called Cornoyer Hedrick.
Huh. Back in Phoenix.
So it was probably October when I got that phone call. And
so had you sent resumes and stuff like that? How did they find out about it? Just other people?
Well, so at that time, Cornoyer Hedrick made its kind of name doing developer-driven projects, and one of their lead clients at the time was Fife Symington, when he was just a developer and not governor and all that stuff. And so they were kind of the up-and-coming firm, and competing against Lindrum. And
I remember those days very well.
Yeah, and so anyways, I had a lot of classmates that had taken jobs who stayed here and took jobs at Cornoyer Hedrick, and they recommended me. So I kind of had an interview over the phone. I think I probably mailed a physical portfolio. Yeah,
there were no emails or
right
FTP sites. Or
I remember taking the job, sitting in my parents' kitchen from a wall phone, talking to Jeff Cornoyer, and it was October. I had a Fiat convertible, a drawer full of flip flops and shorts, and And in October in the Chicago area, none of those do you any good.
Right.
And I knew lots of friends out here, and
Time
so
to head back to the desert.
oh my gosh, it was a pretty easy decision.
So that must have been pretty exciting.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that was a real exciting time. I mean, it was the early 80s, a lot of crazy things going on. I think, our company was a fast-growing company. So
how big was the firm about that time when you joined?
When I started there, I think we were probably around 30 people.
Okay.
When I left there, almost 20 years later, we were about 130 people.
Yeah.
So it was a huge growth as Phoenix grew commercially. We grew, and so it was a great learning experience.
Yeah, it's a very well known firm. I mean, anyone in the valley knows that firm. Especially anyone in architecture. It was very well regarded. And what are they doing these days?
Well, the firm actually, when I started there, a couple of my early mentors who were designers at the time, one of them, Mike Davis, started a company now it's called Davis.
Right.
And eventually, for basically bought Cornoyer Hedrick at the time. So we merged the two firms together. He had left probably about halfway through my tenure there, and went to work for a couple other companies, and then ended up starting his own with another former partner from Cornoyer Hedrick, and then we ended up merging the firms, and I stayed there for about 11 months after that. I'd been there almost 20 years, been thinking about going on my own for a long time, and it just seemed like it was kind of weird because we just had done that transition, but it was kind of time for me to jump off the diving board and do my own thing.
So what finally prompted you to do that? I mean,
like I said, I mean, I probably, like a lot of people who are on the fence of starting their own business, I probably had a lot of long, kind of sleepless nights thinking about it. And to be honest with you, I went from being a partner in a company to essentially being an employee in a company, and it just felt different. Even though I had a title, I was a principal. I had the business card to prove it. It just didn't feel the same. And I, the other part of it was we did strictly commercial. We did a few residential things, and I've always had a longing to do custom residential, and there wasn't really the opportunity to do that. And so I was like, if I'm ever going to do it, let's do it now.
Yep.
And
what year was this?
That was 2002.
2002. Okay. And I left George's firm, and George kind of retired in '99, so just about the same time. So
which time was that George retired?
Well, he retired several. He's kind of like Michael Jordan, he kept coming back. But yeah, our careers have really kind of followed the same timeline. It's really interesting. And we both went to ASU 78, 79. We, got our first jobs. I worked with George for 18 years. We were there for 20.
I think the same. I think actually, when I met you the very first time, and you probably don't remember this, but I believe it was our landscape group had done the landscape for a project you were working on, and I think it was the Dorrance residence in Paradise Valley, and you gave a tour to our, to Cornoyer Hedrick folks, and went through there and toured that house. I remember that.
Oh my gosh, I don't remember that. So we did two houses for him. I wonder if it was the first one or the second one.
This is the one that's kind of up on the hill, kind of. I don't know if it's on Shadow Mountain, but it's right there.
Okay, it's the first one.
Yeah,
I do kind of remember that now that you say that. Yeah, that was it. And then that house is for sale again.
I know. I saw that. Yeah, I'm actually doing houses right across the fairway from that, and
on
then
Desert
right down
Fairways,
the fairway.
or what's that? Eucalyptus.
I've got one. Actually, we have design review. They formed their own little HOA.
Interesting.
I've got a design review meeting tomorrow on the one on Eucalyptus, and then I've got one under construction on Shadow Shadow Mountain.
Nice area.
Yeah,
some nice lots,
beautiful.
Nice views.
My goodness, yeah.
So that was. So you're on your own. You decided to just go for it, right?
Yep.
And was it just you by yourself, or did you have some people that joined you? Or
it was kind of funny. So one of my best friends from college is also an architect, and had gone a little different route, but mostly on the commercial side. And we had been talking for a little while about putting a firm together. He had been on his own. We had similar backgrounds. and we talked about putting a firm together. Literally had my wife doing kind of partnering meetings where you kind of list all the things that you have in common and your goals and all that kind of stuff.
So you already were married at this point.
Yes. So we went through that whole process, and I finally got to the point where I was ready to pull the trigger, and I called him up, this future partner of mine. Yep. And I said, okay, I'm ready to go. Let's do it. And he's like, well, I've had a change of plans. And his business was going a different direction. He didn't want to go the way that I wanted to go. And I just remember I had a decision to make, and I'd already committed. And I said, okay, well, we'll office together. We'll sit back to back. It'll be the best of both worlds. It'd be like having a partner that you can bounce things off of. Yep. And you can have the benefit of having a partner, but you make all your own decisions.
Right. And live with the consequences.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I launched my own firm just by myself, sitting right next to him. And it was just him, and I think he had one employee. Huh. And that's how it kind of started.
So did you guys take some office space somewhere? Or?
We did. I actually had a friend that had a makeup company. It was actually a national makeup company, but he ran it off of Cattle Track.
Mm-hmm.
Had an office space. Ironically, if you're familiar with Bill Tull, I guess he wasn't technically an architect, but the architectural designer Bill Tull, has coffee table books and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Well, his office, when he passed away, that was his space.
Okay.
And when that space came up, a friend of mine took it. Then a friend of mine that had the makeup company decided to sell the makeup company and get rid of that space. My friend actually took the lease on it, and then I moved in about 6 months later.
Interesting.
So, yeah. And now I'm about 20 feet away. I mean, I was in there for about 3.5 years, and then they actually moved an adobe ranch house right next door to it from a lot about half a mile away. And I ended up taking that space.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a nice little area. I mean, there's a lot of good architects right in that. I mean, that's where George ended up going,
right.
Ironically.
Yeah, there's like a little design niche in there between, Swabak's there and George's old,
yep.
I don't know if Andrew is still over there. But yeah, there's interior designers and structural engineers, yep. And it's and that always was kind of it's an arts kind of centered area. It's really
right.
surprising. I mean,
yep.
Cattle Track, you have people like Nils Lofgren lives there.
Right.
You have, just people you wouldn't know. I mean, some of the most famous artists in Phoenix history all lived on that street.
Track,
yeah. Not Dennis Nimkina. Who's the famous artist? Did the really bright colored kind of Indian paintings?
Oh, I don't know. But I'm thinking Dennis Nimkina, but I know that's probably not it.
I'm thinking Dennis Nimkina was the architect.
But he did art too.
But this is somebody more famous than that.
Okay.
That you and I couldn't afford their paintings. Was right across the street, and it was a really interesting area because I would have I have Sandra Day O'Connor would walk through my office
yep.
every now and then because she knew the land, the people that was leased from. She knew them.
Now, Cornoyer was on Missouri, weren't they?
When I started, we were at 16th and Missouri in a building that we had designed.
Yep, I remember that.
We're there for a number of years, and then we designed Camelback Esplanade.
Okay, and you guys moved over there.
Right, and so when they built that first tower, that was kind of one of those deals. You design our building, you become a tenant. And
yep, part of your deal, part of the negotiations.
So we moved into there and took the whole 4th floor because we were big stuff, and within about 2 years, the economy tanked. I think that's when the big S&L crisis happened, and that was a learning curve.
That was a nasty period for a while there. So you're over on the Cattle Track, and how long are you on Cattle Track? Are you still there, or where are you at now?
We are still there. Like I said, okay. I officed in the building next door for about 3.5 years, and then when this Adobe Ranch house was moved, it was so I'm on the Ellis property. It's the Cattle Track compound or Cattle Track Arts compound.
Yep.
And it's a really unique property. And George Ellis, who homesteaded that property, was an engineer and had actually built homes for Frank Lloyd Wright and all kinds of. There's a really interesting history over there. And this was one of the homes that George had designed and built, 1941. It's Adobe. It's kind of I call it the original green building, because just back when green was just a color and
Right.
not, some sort of catchphrase for sustainability. And because literally it's built out of mud essentially.
Yeah.
It's built out of Adobe that was made right on the site. All the wood, timbers, everything in there is all recycled materials.
Very cool.
It was built before air conditioning, so it was actually built to work with nature
Right.
and so forth. And then they moved it. Janie, his daughter, who owns the place, moved it. And I just saw an opportunity that if I was ever going to grow, I needed to take that space, so I did.
Interesting. That's a great story.
Yeah.
So you've been there all this time?
Yeah, I've been there 18 years.
Wow. So what were some of your first projects when you went on your own?
Well, when I went on my own, I mean, the most valuable thing that I took with me, other than I guess my talent and desire to succeed and be able to feed my kids, was my Rolodex.
Right.
If you can remember when people had a Rolodex.
Yep.
So, I was really fortunate. I was because I was a partner at Cornoyer Hedrick. I had worked with really a lot of the biggest developers and kind of movers and shakers and so forth in the valley. So I had a great Rolodex.
Yeah.
I was also fortunate that I had a couple of clients that I was doing work for that wanted me to continue working for them. So I tried to do it in along with the firm that I was leaving. And so my first project was probably a 500,000 square foot senior living project for Sharon Harper.
Yep.
And I was doing work for Suncor at the time. Basically, all of the what's called Marina Heights, all the pre-design entitlements, everything that taking that land from being just dirt that was owned by 3 different owners to creating all the entitlements for all that State Farm stuff that you see there now. Yep. We did all the original master planning and all that, and we were tiny. At that time I was like a 2-person firm, but
off you went.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of commercial work at the beginning, sounds like.
Right.
And then, but you have a real passion, you already mentioned this, of residential work. So how did you make that transition, and how did that start?
So probably the way that it got its start, I was doing a home, we call it Monk's Shadow, when I met a couple. I remember being at an event at Kiva Elementary, and my wife said, "Oh, you've got to meet these couples. They're looking for an architect. They want a modern architect to do their house." And so I had all these names in my head that I was going to help them with. And so when I did meet them, I said, "Well, you should talk to Eddie Jones and Will Bruder and I can't remember who the third one was." And so they went off and talked to these people, and I came back a few months later and said, "Well, we'd like to talk to you about doing our home." And I remember thinking, gosh, because I really wanted to do it. And it's a really amazing site on Camelback Mountain. And I just basically made a list of all the things that were going to talk them out of hiring me. Like, here's my list of demands, which is not what usually when you're looking for a job, you don't have a list of demands. And I said, you got to use this builder and you got to do this. And one of the things I said, you can't have a schedule, because if you have a schedule, I said, I'm a partner at this large firm, so I can only work on your project in my free time, and I have no free time, and I said, and I'm going to charge X, and that was even a foreign thing to me, that I was going to charge for doing something I actually love doing. And I keep waiting for them to say, "Okay, well, that's nice. We'll talk to you later."
Yeah.
And when I was done telling them all the reasons why they shouldn't hire me,
Well, it's like that hot date you're trying to get. You make it so impossible that you just want them that much more. Right.
And so I got that job, and to be honest with you, that probably set the tone for our for the kind of next 18 years of my career, because that particular client, I mean, they had bought this property. It was the original owner he had owned a bunch of property on Camelback Mountain, had his choice of which one to build his house, built his house in 1957 on this property. This couple bought it because it was a happy home.
Right.
It just felt happy. I remember that.
Yep.
I still use that term. He said it's a happy home. and in fact, there was multiple bids on this property, and the seller heard them when they walked through say, this feels like a happy home. And so even though they weren't the high bid, he sold it to them because they said it was a happy home.
Yep.
So this was kind of the mentality that I worked with. Plus, I'm going to forget the gentleman's name, but this client had grown up in a cliffhanger house in Clearwater Hills. So it was all about design and architecture, and they had lived on this site for 10 years, so he knew everything about it. He knew where the sun went in the winter, so he knew exactly where to put the pool, and so he was very sensitive about that. So it was really a great process.
That's cool.
And that really got me going. I mean, compared to kind of the developer, work that I did.
Right. It is totally different, isn't it?
It's totally different, and most of the people that I used to work with in the developer side of things, they don't get how I can do it. Not that I can do it. They don't get why I would want to do it.
Right.
Because in the developer world, you're used to working with people who develop buildings for a living.
It's time and numbers and money.
And they hire consultants. They've got it figured out. You have experts all around you.
Yep.
Most of our clients, you're at a point where you have a lot of repeat clients, I'm sure.
Yep.
So they've been through the drill. But as a residential architect in general, I think most of your clients, you're the first and only time that they may ever talk to an architect.
Or build anything in their life.
Or build anything. And it's literally outside of raising their children. It is the hardest thing or the biggest decision and the biggest investment that they will make in their life. And they are deathly afraid to do something wrong.
Right.
And so you have to kind of talk them off the cliff the whole time. So, that compared to
it's a whole different psychology working with a residential customer than a commercial customer.
Oh my gosh. For commercial, does it look great? Yeah. Has it got, is the load factor super low? Yeah. Are you going to make a lot of money on this building? Yeah. Okay. Sold.
Yeah. Let's go. Let's get to work.
Yeah. As opposed to, I don't know about that shape of that tile.
I really like blue or green, but my husband likes blue, but I like green. And I always tell people, here's my fee as an architect. Here's my fee as an architect, marriage counselor, psychologist, right? There's a lot of those other aspects that go into what we do as a residential architect.
Oh, there is. Our business, you can't do our business, I think, well, unless you really
engage yourself with the customer.
You engage, and because you're not thinking for yourself, you're thinking for the home that you're designing for your client.
Right.
And you need to be able to sit in your office or late at night, whatever your process may be, and think like them and make decisions that are for them that you think that they would like.
So what type of spaces do you primarily design today? You talk about organic design component, and there's a couple of houses that stand out when I think of you, I think of the one on Nani right next to the one we just finished. What's it, Dancing Light? Dancing Light. A beautiful house.
Well, thank you.
It's fantastic. You use some of the rammed earth. You got all these great materials. So talk about your design and your what motivates you, what inspires you.
Well, we strive or consider ourselves, I guess, to be kind of regional modernist, if you will. And what's important to me is that anything that we design looks like it belongs where it is. We do a little bit of different things. We don't design kind of traditional styles of architecture. We think of it more as a process, not a style.
Right.
And so we look at the land, we look at, the uniqueness of the site, the uniqueness of the client, and we try to design something that if somebody sees it in a magazine in, Istanbul or something like that, they look at it and they have a sense of where it is in the world because it looks like it belongs. And I think that's really where that kind of Frank Lloyd Wright influence comes from. It's designed for the uniqueness of the land. And I also feel like that whole passive solar side of things, that if you design, in a way that respects the land, you're always going to be better off.
Sure.
If you do a glass box in the desert, guess what? It's going to get hot. It's going to cook.
Right.
You created your own problems that now you have to solve. We'd rather solve them through architecture.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about ARA a little bit. We both joined it at the same time. We're all founding members. I think that there's a couple new ones. Eddie Jones is a new one.
Right.
But we all got involved. It was what, 2010? Yeah, we're celebrating
Yeah,
the 10-year
right.
anniversary.
Right. We're
2010.
celebrating our 10th year.
So it was really formed, obviously, by Nick. Nick is the one that approached
Right.
me. I think he approached you, Nick Tassantakis. Great job doing this. I saw he's got something now in Michigan he's doing.
Yeah.
He's expanding,
Yeah,
right?
he's. I think he's more of a publisher than an architect. He'd hate to hear that, but,
Yeah.
or maybe he would see that as a major point of pride. He's been very successful.
He's
with
doing
it.
a great job. But he all approached us at the same time. In 2010, the economy was horrible.
Yes.
And we all kind of bonded as a group of architects to really promote the profession of residential architecture and why it was important to hire a residential architect when you design a house. Obviously, we know plenty of builders and developers, whatever you want to call them, that hire draftspeople.
Right.
Or I don't know what you really call them. I don't even know if they have the credit of being called draftspeople. I think some of them are, I'm not sure what they are.
Right. I think technically you're supposed to be called, maybe residential designers or.
Right.
I don't know. I know that they can't legally be called architects, at least in the state of Arizona.
Right. So this group is really formed to promote good design, hiring an architect, what the value is in hiring an architect. And I think we've done a really good job in doing that. And I think one of the other interesting aspects of our group, when I talk to builders or interior designers or other groups, they're always in awe of how we all get along. I hear it especially from builders. I said, boy, if we put a group like that of builders together, we'd be in a fist fight within an hour and a half,
It's a real shame. But I can tell you, I remember when I worked at Cornoyer Hedrick, we were very competitive. We thought we were the best in town, and oh my gosh, if anybody else that kind of did what we did,
poo-poo on them.
Yeah, but it was such a competitive thing.
Yeah.
And when I went out on my own, I remember one of our competitors, I'll say his name, Rick Butler. Rick gave me a call about a week after I started my own practice to ask me if I could help him with some stuff. And I remember thinking, gosh, it's so unusual. And I was like, well, sure. And gosh, how appreciative I was that here I am starting my business. And this other person who has their own firm had something that was maybe out of the norm for them or something, or maybe they were just busy and they needed help.
Right.
And so I remember that was a good experience. But the competitiveness between architects and other people in business, I think part of it's good, but part of it is you're missing so much. And when Nick got all of us kind of together, I think for a lot of us, I know myself, I was looking at, we're going to publish a magazine twice a year. I get my work in a magazine. I get to choose what it is. I'm going to pay a reasonable amount of money at the time. We were thinking we would. And, that was the attraction for me. And I remember after the first couple meetings we had, and when it really dawned on me what the value was I had a project out in Ahwatukee or something that needed a steel door, like a whatever they call it, not Arcadia, I forget what you even call it, but it's more of a traditional kind of steel door. And I was thinking, I'm a one-man shop. I don't know what this is. I don't know who does it well. And I thought, I'll send an email out to my partners. You were one of the first people. You probably were the first person that answer back. And you gave me an answer. It's like, here's 3 people that I would recommend. Here's why I would recommend them.
Yep.
Here's the 3 people I wouldn't recommend.
Right.
And I got probably 6 other answers like that within 20 minutes. Right. And I was like, that's the power of that group, is that I'm not just a one-man firm anymore. I have the benefit of the knowledge, the collective knowledge of this larger group that has a goal of raising the bar for residential design.
See, and that's it right there. You nailed it. I think that's the allure of it for me, is I love how we all help each other, and we're competitors. I get it, but what I see is it is constantly raising the bar, and I think it has really made our group, it really has set us apart in terms of the services we offer, how we deal with situations. We all learn from it. It makes our profession, I think, better.
I had an opportunity to do a project in Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates.
That's kind of east of Mesa, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I just remember that it was just this kind of weird weird thing where I was literally getting on a plane. I had a first class ticket to fly over there for an interview for a client. I didn't know who the client was. They wouldn't tell me who the client was. It was very kind of hush hush. And I remember I was turning 50 at the time, and I just said, screw it. This sounds really scary, but I'm just going to do it. I gave them my passport information. They sent me the tickets, and I was ready to get on a plane. And I was like, I don't know anything about that culture. I need to educate myself. And I had heard that John B. over at Swabak's office had done some projects in Saudi Arabia and so forth. And I called him up, and he said, well, why don't you come over, the night before? And he gave me a crash course. Now, mind you, the night before was Valentine's Day.
Oh, God.
He literally took Valentine's Day. We were in his office till probably 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
He's a great guy.
While he's telling me all these words I don't even know, how they organize things. It was like this crash course education, and I'm like, who does that?
Yeah,
our group does that.
Yeah, our group does do that. I had the fortune of going to Italy on that Bromball
right.
window thing with John, and what a great guy. I mean, that's what I love about some of those trips. You finally get to know some of these people.
Yeah.
And so our groups have a lot of fun. I mean, we're talking about COVID a little bit earlier tonight. We can't really get the group together anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, until this all passes, but we have a good time when we do get together.
And well, we do. We have a good time, and we and the value of the things we do when we're not together. Just kind of the group think, if you will. We still have that value, but yeah, we do have a good time.
So you mentioned your lovely wife Jerry earlier. How did you guys meet? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, well, that's
you told me a little bit before we started
subject.
recording, and I had no idea, but that's a pretty interesting story.
Well, so when I graduated from college, again, a little naive and probably a little immature, started working for Cornoyer Hedrick. We were an architecture firm, and everybody was architects in it. And of course, architects know everything, right?
Of course,
we're the masters of the universe.
That's right.
And so we decided that I guess we wanted to hire somebody in interiors to do the lobbies of the office buildings we were doing. And so we started an interiors group, and they hired my now wife, Jerry, to head up that group and start that group. And so it was already this kind of, I don't know, it was just kind of it was awkward. Again, I wasn't mature enough to kind of realize the value. And we sat on either side of a partition. And so, she likes to say how she would hear every Monday morning of my wild escapades over the weekend, and, probably thought I was, not somebody she'd ever want to be with. And, about 8 years later, and I didn't share this with you before, but she had lost her husband to cancer, and very quickly. One of those, prognosis you get, and 2 or 3 months later, you're gone. And I think I saw the person that she was through that. This person I thought was solely a career focused person,
right.
And I saw the actual inner person that she was, and learned to really appreciate that. And then for the next year or so after that, kind of opened my eyes and so forth. And also by this point, we had grown to a different company where we had not just interior design, but landscape architecture, graphic design, land planning, space planning, interior design. We were a very diverse firm, and I had worked on a few, projects and large corporate projects where we did all of those things. And so I really got to see kind of the power of collaboration. I think I had matured into the kind of person that could appreciate my wife, and fortunately she could appreciate me. So we actually, so that was it.
That's where it happened.
We disliked each other for about 8 years, and then, got married about a year later.
Wow. So it was 8 years.
Yeah, I think it probably was about that long.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
So do you have any children? You have?
Yes. 2 boys.
2 boys,
25 and 28.
That goes by fast too, doesn't
27, soon to be 28. Of course it does. Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it goes by really fast, and it was, interesting timing when I think about, my youngest was really involved in sports, and I've always been a bit of a workaholic, and
Yep.
you always feel like if you're not the first one in, the last one to leave, that you're not working hard enough.
That's how architecture is.
And when the last really big recession hit in 2008, I remember it was like I felt like I was. Something I wasn't carrying my weight. Something the work wasn't there. I didn't have a lot of work, and it took me a while to realize that doesn't matter how hard I work. That work isn't out there. So what's really most important? And I looked at my youngest son at the time, who was involved in so many different sports, and I said, you know what? I am not going to miss a sporting event or a family event again, ever.
Yeah.
And because I had the time.
Yeah.
But then I also realized that it was just more important. And so, I went to every football game, every basketball game, every baseball game, everything, traveled all over, and
you can't get those back. I mean, that's the thing.
You can't.
And you have those memories now, and they're priceless, right?
Yeah, they are. And it was just, to see your child grow and see both my children grow. They couldn't be more different. I mean, one, is a scientist. He's a molecular and cellular biologist working down at TGen.
Wow.
And the other one works for Swift Transportation and is doing great, and just recently got engaged. So this is a great time in our lives. I know that you have kids. I think about the same age at least as ours, and it's so fun to see their successes and see them, the people they've grown into.
Yeah, it is very cool. And another thing that you mentioned, you and Jerry are both very involved in a lot of charities and a lot of groups. I think SARC is probably your most passionate one that I know I affiliate you both with.
Yeah, it's we were fortunate to be friends. My wife was very good friends with Denise Resnick way before probably we were together, and before kids. Yep. And so as many people who are probably listening to this that know Denise and know her story, they had Matt, and not that long after, about a year and a half maybe later, we had Player, my oldest, and I remember them coming over to our home with Matt to see the baby, and that was, at least that I know of, that was kind of one of Matt's kind of first episodes, kind of autistic. Yeah. Episodes, and I remember them leaving, and it was very confusing, and then I remember when I heard the diagnosis that Matt was autistic, and I knew Denise, I knew how driven and how successful, what a positive person she was, and I remember thinking, my gosh, how does something like this happen to someone like her? Right. And then I think it was like a year later, I was at a fundraiser. I think it was at one of your friends, Eddie, matinees or something like that. And they had a fundraiser there, and they had a video and everything. And I remember being there for that event, and I think it was one of the first SARC events. And I remember just watching all of that, seeing what she had started. Just started. I mean, there's maybe 100 people in a room. Now they get 2,000 people in the room, and it's like an international deal. But I just remember looking over at her, and I think I may have even said to her, "It's like, now I know why this happened to you."
It's interesting, isn't it?
No, it makes me choke up just talking about it.
Yeah, it is. I know the Sobelmans really well. They were clients of mine. Howard and Wendy are fabulous people, and that's how they get. That's how I get my invite all the time. Yeah, is them, and they're just great people.
And I think their son has worked for both of us.
Yeah,
or interned anyway.
He's a good kid. So no, I think I applaud you for that. I think what we can do to help and give back to our community, whether you're wealthy or whether you're not. I mean, you can always give time,
right?
And you can always give your heart. You can always give your soul, and I think those things are just so important. I mean, it's really what adds the color to life. Puts things in perspective. Let's put it that way.
Well, it definitely puts things in perspective, and you look at these people that like get up and speak at the breakfast and so forth
Yeah.
that have, the things that have happened in their lives, the obstacles they've had to overcome. Boy, you look at your own obstacles and you go, that's nothing.
Right. That's what I say. It puts it all in perspective.
Yeah, it really does.
You realize you can get through a lot more than you think you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Right. Absolutely.
It's like, okay, this is not a big deal. Let's just buck up and let's do it.
And look at the good things that, like I said, why did this happen to Denise? This one person. Well, look what that one person created, and how many people that's touched, and how many lives that's improved.
Exactly right.
Literally thousands.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep. So, how do you deal with stress? What do you do to get away? I mean, you guys like to travel, don't you?
We do.
We're not doing much traveling now, but I mean that's one of the things I think you do like to do.
No, I really love to do it. I haven't done it to the extent that you have by any stretch. And when my kids were young and of an age that would have been fun to travel was that kind of 2008 to 2010 time. So I didn't know if we were going to have money to put them through school. Let alone travel and do something exotic. So. It's kind of like when we finally got to that point where we were kind of empty nesters, last kids getting through school and first ones graduating and had fortunately had some success. And finally, when my oldest son graduated, it's like, we want to take a family trip, and your graduation present is you get to pick where we're going. And, I remember I'm thinking, hopefully he wants to go to Italy or Greece or I'm thinking all the kind of European countries, and he's always been fascinated with ancient cultures, and so he picks Peru. And at the time I'm thinking, Peru, really? Oh my God! I was like, oh, okay, well that's what he wants to do. Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Trip of a lifetime.
There you go.
We did 3 weeks in Peru. Because I felt like we hadn't traveled the way I wanted to. When the kids were growing up, we did everything first class. Stayed in, stayed in a home that was built in the 1500s by an Italian family on the foundation of the first Incan emperor.
Oh my gosh!
It sounds really extravagant, but it's not if you just kind of plan it and you do it.
Yep.
That was just a trip of a lifetime. But of all the cool things we saw, the best part of it was doing that kind of hike to Machu Picchu.
Yep.
And you're up there like 15,000 feet. I'm an old guy. I'm huffing and puffing, just hoping to stay up. And there's nothing but us and one guide and llamas, around. I mean, we were not with a group. We were the group.
Oh, that's cool.
And just my family. And but you're up there and you're literally surrounded by nothing but peaks that go up to about 20,000 feet or snow covered. It was just, and I remember looking forward, and of course the boys are like billy goats.
Yeah,
and so they're like, they're a quarter mile in front of us to see, and of course there's no cell service or anything like that, no distractions up there. And to see my boys talking to each other, because they're 2 years apart, so they had that kind of rivalry thing and kind of went their own ways. To see them talking and laughing and bonding, it's like that made it all worth it.
That's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, travel for me is just the refuel of the tanks. I mean, there's so much visual, input that goes into your subconscious just from all the things you see that you can draw upon. And I just love that.
You had the benefit also of working for George, which you mentioned before, and that was the one thing I remember thinking. George's wealth was all in travel.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, George is a really well-known architect, very successful, but when I looked at his home and his kind of lifestyle, it seemed very just okay.
It's pretty
but then
basic.
I realized he spent all his money on travel.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he lived a very modest life, as you know. I mean, his house on 12th Street was nothing but a big old ranch house that he split in half.
Right, right.
And we must have drew sketches for 20 years of big grand ideas for that property. And,
oh my gosh!
And so it was a lot of fun. But yeah, he loved travel, and he loved going out and having a good scotch with everybody, and a lot of good memories.
Yeah, it took, unfortunately it took me a little while to get that bug. And then, and like I said, we did the Peru thing, and within that year, I mean, we went to Greece, we went to Italy twice, once on the Brambal thing, and once I was, actually, I guess it was just twice. Yeah. Once went on, what was it? The Italian Trade Commission flew me over there to go to a trade show in Milan.
I remember that.
And that was really fun. And we, so yeah,
you got the bug.
I got the bug, and we'd be there right now if we could.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what lies ahead for Brent Kendle, and what are some of the goals or bucket list items?
Well, definitely travel. That's it, probably
more travel.
Yeah, much more travel to, places we haven't been and places that we have. I mean, I know you just went not that long ago. I think it was over the summer. You're up in the Willamette Valley.
Oh, loved it.
Oh my gosh, one of my favorite places. Well, just Oregon in general.
Yeah,
I mean, unfortunately,
awesome.
There's a lot of craziness happening in Portland.
Yeah, I can skip Portland right now, but
yeah, it's unfortunate because Portland's such a cool town.
Great city. Same in San Francisco. I wouldn't go there right now. It's
it's unfortunate. But you get outside there, you get the Willamette Valley is 20 to 30 minutes away, and you're in a whole nother world. It's kind of like Napa 30 years ago.
Well, that Pinot you're drinking is right from there right now.
Best Pinots in the world are from there. Yeah. But and then you're like an hour and a half from the coast.
Yeah, it's awesome. There's everything. Well, we got to do some traveling together. That's something that would
be fun.
You and I would have a good time on our Italy tour.
Yeah.
So I got to get a couple architects on that tour someday because I think we'd have a blast. So.
That would be fun.
Well, thanks for doing this, my friend. Great job.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I was curious to see what interviewing another architect on your podcast would be like.
I want to get you back because there's some more things I want to talk about, but we ran out of time here. But I'd like to get more into design, and we can talk about some of those things and running a firm. I think there's some interesting things there that people could garnish from our experience. So,
sure.
So I'll have you back.
Okay. Well, that sounds great.
All right, my friend. Thank you.
All right.
I want to say a big thank you to my good friends at Stockett Tile and Granite Company, where your project is our priority. I want to thank the Stockett team along with so many others who contributed to the success of our fabulous demonstration kitchen in our new Candelaria design office expansion. You will have to check out our online video cooking classes, and our kitchen is amazing. I've had the pleasure of working with the Stockett team for nearly 40 years on many spectacular projects, and trust me, they are the epitome of excellence when it comes to tile, marble, and granite work, bar none. Their skill and customer service is impeccable, and the bottom line is they are just good people. I have traveled with, dined with, and just had good times, both personally and professionally, with Dave Stockett and his lovely wife, Becky, and they are the best. When it comes to your next tile and stone project, make sure Stockett Tile and Granite is a part of your team. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed our podcast. We encourage you to write a review, screenshot it, and share it with your friends. Please instant message it to me and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We thank you for listening, and we look forward to sharing more insights to inspiring living next week.